More than any African president, Traoré has been the subject of devious assassination and destabilization plots. But thankfully, he has been able to scale through them up till now. And now he has devoted his time to investigating those responsible and removing them from their place of power. Recently, the local Burkinabe news revealed that the authorities in Burkina Faso have frozen the assets and economic resources of at least 113 individuals involved in the destabilization plot. But is that all that has been done to these coup and destabilization plotters? Let's find out. On November 19, 2024, the Burkinabe Minister of Economy, Dr. Abubakar Nakanabo, announced that an executive order had been signed by Traoré's administration. This order froze the assets and economic resources of at least 113 individuals and 2 legal entities. Among the 113 individuals are the former military junta Paul Henri Damiba, the 2 former foreign affairs ministers, Gendarmerie General Jibril Bassol, journalists Alpha Barry, Abdoulaye Barry, Newton Ahmed Barry, and the former deputy mayor of Dori, Aziz Diallo. The order also affected some officers who have already been dismissed from the Burkinabe National Armed Forces. These military officers were Amed Kinda, the former commander of the National Theater Operations Command, COTN, Yves Didier Bamouni, and Romeo Ouoba, former commander of the Special Forces. Now, the order further revealed that all these people worked together to orchestrate the devious plan to destabilize Burkina Faso and overthrow President Traoré. The executive order also targeted armed terrorist groups that are active in Burkina Faso. According to the order, these groups are accused of participating in acts of terrorism or financing terrorism. But that's not all that has been done against these coup plotters. You see, the former Burkina Faso military junta, Paul Henri Damiba, is the brain behind the recent assassination and coup plot against President Traoré. The most shocking thing is that he is currently in Togo and has been in Togo since 2022. This means that he orchestrated the attack on President Traoré while in Togo. Now, when news of the devious plot was first announced, the question on everyone's mind was, will he be brought to justice? This is a very valid question because it is a well-known fact that African leaders are good at evading the law and justice after committing crimes. However, the Burkinabe government recently announced that President Traoré is currently in discussions with the government of Togo to extradite the former military junta to Burkina Faso. The question is, will the discussions be successful and will he be brought to justice? Before we proceed, here is a reminder to like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe. Now, in one of his speeches, Traoré revealed that the former military government did nothing to improve conditions for Burkina Faso's army, widely considered one of the weakest in Africa. In an interview, Traoré complained about the poor conditions and inadequate equipment of his troops in battle. He said, "I go out on patrols with my men and we lack basic logistics. In some villages, the trees have no leaves because people eat them. They eat weeds. We have been proposing solutions that could protect these people, but they have not been listened to. We have made so many proposals. Imagine the situation in which the army had to work." When Traoré saw that the old military junta was not doing anything, he staged a coup and overthrew Paul Henri Damiba. Immediately after his downfall, the old military junta fled to Togo for refuge, and he has been there ever since. However, the former military government was not satisfied with the way things were going, so she started to hatch an evil and nefarious plan to overthrow President Traoré. However, this plan was not only aimed at overthrowing President Traoré, but also at destabilizing Burkina Faso. So what was this plan? According to Burkina Faso's Minister of Security, Mahamadou Sana, a detailed and complex plan was hatched by some Burkina Faso nationals living in neighboring countries such as Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Nigeria. These people seem not to be happy with President Traoré being in power and therefore decided to make a plan to remove him from power. According to the minister's report, those involved in planning the plot include some Burkina Faso civilians, military and ex-military personnel, all of whom are supported by Western intelligence services. Burkina Faso civil society and economic actors were also involved in the plot. The Burkina Faso minister also announced that several people have already been arrested and that the arrests were made in Niger. But what is shocking is that the mastermind of the plot was Paul Henri Damiba, a former Burkina Faso military dictator. This man from Togo has worked with several prominent figures in Burkina Faso, including former ministers, journalists, and former members of parliament. The caliber of people involved in this destabilization plot shows how deep and comprehensive it is. These people have been working behind the scenes for some time to overthrow President Traoré and take over the country. The fact that the former military junta is involved in this plot makes it even more shocking because when Mr. Traoré was ousted, he seemed to accept it with dignity and quietly resigned. However, he still seems to harbor resentment for being involved in this plot, and foreign governments are using this to hatch plots to destabilize the government. This time, the Minister of Security announced that those arrested had been interrogated in detail, and important information had been revealed about the depth of the conspiracy and the plans of those involved. What they uncovered was a very vicious and evil conspiracy that shows how far some people will go just to gain power. Now, do you remember how Burkina Faso recently suffered several attacks by jihadist groups and how successful these jihadist groups were in their attacks? Well, according to those arrested, these jihadist attacks were organized by their groups. Yes, that's right. According to them, part of their plan was to contact and cooperate with terrorist groups to carry out violent attacks against civilians and government institutions. Even more shocking is the fact that the recent massacre in Barcelona, a city that is the last remaining military base between the terrorist group and the capital, Ouagadougou, in which more than 309 people were killed and many more injured, was also part of their plan. But that's not all. Before their arrest, the conspirators also revealed that they had plans to attack the presidential palace, a drone base, the Ouagadougou airport, and a military base in Mangodara. How can someone who claims to be a leader and wants the good of the people go to such extremes even to the point of hurting civilians? This just shows that the former military junta is no different from all the other democratically elected leaders who work only in their interests. But the question is, what was the aim of this devious plot? While the Burkina Faso army and the government of Ibrahim Traoré are hard at work and desperately searching for a solution to the terrorism problem that has claimed thousands of lives, some Burkina Faso nationals, military officials, and politicians are sabotaging everything behind the scenes. These people have deliberately contacted JNIM, one of the most dangerous terrorist organizations that has terrorized the Sahel region for several years, to provide them with information and support their attacks on their own people, resulting in even more injuries and deaths. Their plan was undoubtedly to spread the narrative that terrorist attacks in Burkina Faso have increased while President Traoré is in power, that President Traoré is not doing enough to deal with the insecurity and should be removed from power. Let's assume for now that President Traoré is a bad leader and unfit to lead Burkina Faso. The question is, would a good leader collaborate with jihadist groups and kill civilians and soldiers in order to remove himself from office? The answer is a resounding no. But as we said, Paul Henri Damiba's actions simply show how evil he is and that he is unfit to be the leader of a country. Yes, anyone who thinks that the lives of civilians and soldiers are not important to his personal interests is unfit to be a leader. Fortunately, Burkina Faso authorities quickly identified the plot, arrested several involved parties, and thwarted a significant part of it. Now, the Burkina Faso government has launched a special counterterrorism operation aimed at neutralizing the remaining threats. The government has also warned that such destabilizing acts will no longer be tolerated and called on the families of the conspirators to report and distance themselves from the subversive activities. But President Traoré is not just going to launch a special counterterrorism operation. No, he intends to bring Paul Henri Damiba from Togo to Burkina Faso to stand trial. For this, Mr. Traoré is currently negotiating with the Togolese government to ensure the successful handover of the former military junta. But the question is, will the negotiations be successful? You might think this is a simple legal issue and that Traoré should have no problem recalling the former president. But in reality, the issue is much more complicated. Damiba decided to flee to Togo, where the government offered him refuge. At the time, Togo's communications minister and government spokesman, Akoda Iwadeni, said Damiba's stay in Togo was part of the country's efforts to create peace in the sub-region. We welcome the fact that Togo, like ECOWAS, is permeated by a spirit of peace, he said. Accepting Damiba is part of that spirit. This means Togo may be hesitant to hand him over to Traoré. In other words, Togo is now facing a crisis situation that could shape its relations with Burkina Faso and other African countries in the region. Now, some are criticizing Traoré's decision to hand over the former military junta. These sources say the return of Damiba, who still has supporters in Burkina Faso, could destabilize the country. If he were to return, they argue, these followers could emerge and cause riots and political crisis. To be honest, these critics are right. But the fact is that Burkina Faso's former military junta continues to wreak havoc in Togo. So wouldn't it be better to bring him back to Burkina Faso to make him pay for his crimes? Traoré's decision to put the former junta on trial raises a very important question. How are former African politicians accused of corruption and other crimes treated legally? Are they usually brought to justice, or do they escape the law? In Africa, there is a trend that politicians accused of corruption often escape the law. There are clear cases where many African politicians have escaped justice even after being found guilty. This trend highlights the common belief that African politicians are above the law and can do whatever they want. But in an ideal society, no one should be above the law, leader or not. If he or she commits a crime, the justice system should not bend to diplomacy and should prosecute the accused if found guilty. And no leader should receive special treatment while serving a prison sentence because of his or her previous job. By seeking Damiba's extradition, Traoré is sending a message and setting a precedent that no one is above the law. This is crucial, especially in a region where political impunity is the norm. It's common for politicians to flee justice and seek refuge in neighboring countries. Interestingly, this is exactly what happened to former Burkina Faso President Blaise Compaoré. After orchestrating the assassination of Thomas Sankara, Blaise Compaoré led Burkina Faso as president for 27 years. He destroyed everything Sankara had built and, with French aid, led the country into poverty and underdevelopment. But the people of Burkina Faso eventually grew tired of his rule and launched an uprising in 2014. This ultimately led to his resignation and his exile in Côte d'Ivoire. 2 years later, he was finally charged with the murder of Thomas Sankara and was set to be extradited to Burkina Faso to face the charges. But guess what? Côte d'Ivoire's President Alassane Ouattara signed a presidential decree making Blaise an Ivorian citizen automatically. This decree effectively ended any possibility of his extradition to face murder charges in his home country. Imagine how corrupt leaders in Africa support each other to avoid justice for their crimes. When President Traoré came to power, he ensured that Blaise Compaoré would be tried and sentenced to life in prison. However, the former president is still in Côte d'Ivoire and has not yet served his sentence because the Ivorian government refuses to extradite him. We believe that Mr. Traoré does not want something like this to happen again, and therefore he is currently in talks with the Togolese government to bring Mr. Damiba back to Burkina Faso so that he could face justice for his crimes. Imagine what would have happened if the Burkina Faso government had not immediately realized the plot orchestrated by Damiba. There is no doubt that these conspirators would have planned and executed even more horrific attacks against civilians and authorities. Their actions only show that Africa's problems are African. The life and death of Thomas Sankara, one of Africa's greatest leaders, is a good example. Thomas Sankara and Blaise Compaoré were very good friends who worked together to seize power in Burkina Faso in 1983. This coup, like that of Ibrahim Traoré, was one of the coup masterminds supported by the Burkina Faso people. As we all know, Mr. Traoré has brought many radical changes to Burkina Faso since he took office. He was phenomenal and, above all, incorruptible. Everyone would agree that he did a very good job in Burkina Faso during his tenure. Thomas Sankara was one of the few African heads of state to achieve food self-sufficiency in just a few years without any outside assistance. Not only did he launch the most ambitious socio-economic transformation program ever attempted on the African continent, but he also opposed corruption and supported austerity measures, which is unusual for an African head of state. There is no doubt that if he had lived longer, Burkina Faso would have become one of the largest African countries in the world, but those who did not want such independent leadership and creativity, freed from dependence on the West, decided to overthrow Sankara. And who did they choose for the job? None other than his best friend, Blaise Compaoré. One cannot help but wonder why Blaise decided to betray his friend. Was he jealous of Sankara and wanted to take his place? Whatever the reason, Blaise, with the help of France, staged a coup that resulted in the assassination of Thomas Sankara. One of the reasons the coup was successful was that Sankara was accused of violating the human rights of rebels and suppressing dissent. People believed these coup plotters because they had seen Sankara ban trade unions and a free press. But what they failed to understand was that Sankara was doing the same thing that many revolutionary leaders had done before him. Leaders who want to bring about big changes must take certain actions that may seem bad to some, but are necessary to achieve their goals. Sankara banned trade unions, freedom of the press, and anything that could hinder his plans to completely transform Burkina Faso. However, some people seemed to forget his plans and the great deeds he had done, and focused on what they perceived as human rights violations. Because of this, the coup was successful, and Sankara was replaced by Blaise Compaoré as head of state of Burkina Faso. He spent the next 27 years as president of Burkina Faso, destroying everything Sankara had done, and was naturally hailed by France as a democratic leader. Pathetic. But it is clear that this is the same tactic that will be used to remove President Traoré from power. As we all know, fighting insecurity is one of the main reasons why Traoré came to power. So the plan was to make Traoré think that he is not competent enough to deal with insecurity by increasing the number of attacks in the country. If the destabilization plan is not exposed, there will come a time when even Burkinabesans who have pledged their support to President Traoré will start to withdraw their support, and that is when the conspirators will stage a coup to remove Traoré from power. So they were trying not only to turn the people against Traoré and his government, but also the soldiers against him. If more soldiers lost their lives, some soldiers might mutiny because they feel that Traoré cannot protect and defend them. What an evil plan. But fortunately, Traoré's government saw through this plan and effectively thwarted it. We hope that Traoré will be successful in negotiating Damina's return to Burkina Faso and that he will be brought to justice for his wrongdoings. So freezing the assets and economic resources of the former military junta is a fantastic step in the right direction. It's a punishment that he deserves. By taking this step, President Traoré is showing that no leader is above the law, and anyone who goes against the law or commits a crime will face the consequence of his or her action. In addition to this, Traoré's action will serve as a deterrent to anyone who wants to orchestrate any future plans to destabilize Burkina Faso or remove him from power. The question is this enough to stop those who plan to remove him from power? Will this be the end of any assassination or destabilization plot? Well, only time will tell. But what are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video.